So here we are, further episode of Two Guys in the Cloud.
Is this lucky number 13? I think, is it?
It could be.
Perfect
gosh,
for
It is.
It is.
number 13.
I want to say, and Blair, I appreciate you chiming in there. That's our producer, Blair, that our rock and roll music that comes right before our intro, I'm really digging.
Strong.
So I love it. I don't know how cloudy it is, but it's cool.
It rocks.
It rocks, yes. So, yes, folks, welcome to Two Guys in the Cloud. We are very fortunate to be joined by Brian Patalico from Microsoft, and we're going to have a great conversation regarding what we're going to call today's modern device and its relationship with the cloud. And we'll talk about that relationship in depth today. But this is Elliot Barretts. I'm joined with Bob Agno. Mr. Agno.
Happy New Year, everyone. And full disclosure, we used to work with Brian. So it's good to catch up with him and talk a little Microsoft devices today.
It sure is. So Brian, welcome.
Thank you. Now I'm a little jealous of this rock and roll music. I kind of feel like I need to request my own walk-up song or something,
As long as it's free, Brian, you can definitely have whatever you like.
There we go.
We don't pay any copyright fees here on.
There we go. And I appreciate the disclosure there, Elliot. That was very formal and very much appreciated. And I'm glad to join you guys. But obviously, we all know each other very well for what feels like decades of work together, although I think it was about 5 years. So looking forward to chatting with you guys and joining in on the podcast. It's been great listening in so far.
Yeah, no, so true, though, about this dog years, technology years thing, where honestly, I feel like every year in the technology industry is sort of X number of years in, real life, and which is pros and cons, too. I mean, I feel like I've gone through lifetimes with people, through all of this. So, yes, indeed, Brian, we've been through a life together, even though
it's very true. And although I'm certain it was my young children that are responsible for my gray and my beard, I think the dog years of the technology industry certainly can play a part in that as well. Yeah. So, battle wounds and battle scars just right there on the face.
Yeah, well, 2020 gave us all some gray, a little extra, I think.
Yeah, there's that too. Yeah.
So, not everybody having the same time with you, Brian. What may be good is a little bit of, hey, how did Brian's journey unfold? One of the things that we've done on this thing over time is just sort of gotten everybody to tell us their story in terms of getting into the world of technology. And it's been fascinating. I mean, everybody's got to know their own thing, and want to tell us a bit about Brian.
Yeah, I feel like I need a glass of, scotch and a fireside, chair or something to walk through this. But, my background's interesting, to say the least. I started off very young in the action sports industry, of all places, right? I live in Southern California, and it was a prevalent industry here. And I joined a small business, early in my career, just jumped into that. It was a passion of mine. And I think more than anything, the reason I bring it up is I think it required a lot of entrepreneurial spirit to jump into something so small and in such a, I'd say, fast-paced industry. And I think it set me up kind of later on. What it did do, though, is it definitely delayed to some degree my entry into, let's call it corporate America, for lack of a better way to call it. And so, I'm proud to say that I ended up having to go back to school. Didn't get my degree until a little bit later in life, and kind of circled around a couple different businesses that I had started on my own. And I finally landed in, the technology industry just by happenstance. And almost immediately, I took all that stuff from starting my own businesses and starting businesses with colleagues, that kind of that drive, that entrepreneurial drive. And that's honestly the only reason I stayed in the tech space, was it required it. It absolutely required it. I mean, I had to move fast. I had to be thinking on my feet, at least in the roles that I was in and the companies I was in. It really, I found a lot of joy in that, with some more stability. This was back in the time, right around the recession in 2008. and it got, a little rough there. And so I think having that stability, but still being able to drive and do things on your own and be innovative and all that stuff, that's what really kept me in the industry. I'd say I'm still relatively entrepreneurial by spirit. And so, I still get to do that. And then the time we spent together, I thought, that definitely came into force, when I was spent time with PCM and then Insight and this team, I think we were able to really, drive a lot of great initiatives, really own our own business. It was a startup. I mean, we really were just a startup business. And so that trend continued on. And Microsoft, the great thing about Microsoft so far is that they're the same. They really encourage that growth mindset, that speed, the intelligence factor, as well as the culture and all of that. It's the tech industry, for anybody that has that spirit in them, is a great place to go. And that's my journey, at least how I kind of came to be where I am today.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So at Microsoft, then, and that really dovetails into the conversation that we're going to have about,
Sure.
The modern workplace device and devices. Today, you're focused very much in this space.
Yeah.
What does that look like?
Yeah, so I joined Microsoft about a year ago now, from Insight, and it's interesting when I first jumped in and where I still am in today. It's focused on device partners, OEM partners, so HP, Lenovo, Dell, Acer, Panasonic, Samsung, all those major players, and seeing what we can do to position them both in the commercial space and in the retail space. Almost immediately, and this is where Microsoft and that entrepreneurial spirit is so important, is almost immediately within 2 months of me joining, we went through a big old reorganization. And what it really meant was bringing device partners, and specifically for me, I focus on the Acer relationship in the US as well as Panasonic, and bringing those relationships and those solutions and those ideas closer to the cloud. And really, Microsoft's initiative and our organization's initiative within Microsoft is to bring devices to market, to sell devices to market that are going to consume Microsoft cloud technologies. Right now, we'll dive into all the specifics around that, I think, because it's such a unique space that's really starting to get more and more focus. Right, people are looking at smart devices now. The bricks of the laptops of the past don't make sense.
Yeah,
right?
Actually, that's a good point. So when we talk about devices, we're talking about laptops primarily, right? So, just sort of a bit of translation, big part of the conversation is the laptop, and maybe whatever, something you can hold in your hand, or maybe any combination of the two. But a big part of this is what we would have called the laptop.
Yeah, I mean, the edge is probably the easiest, most broad way to talk about this, right? I mean, if you think about every time you go to an ATM machine, right, that's a connected device. You have, tablets in your home. Technically, think about your air conditioning, your thermostat in your house, or, I've got, assistant, devices everywhere in the house. All those are edge devices, right? So all of them are consuming something, consuming cloud specifically. And so it's that broad definition. And that's where a lot of these OEM partners are starting to invest in other spaces too.
Which makes sense. So it's partitioning the conversation where maybe it's like, okay, there's the laptop conversation, which I think is maybe part one.
Yeah.
And then there's the other devices, which I would have thrown into that whole Internet of Things conversation.
Yep.
Appliances, devices that are, grabbing data in the moment, bringing it over to the cloud. Cloud's doing what it does, sends it back, blah, blah, blah.
Yep.
But starting with the laptop, right? Let's just make that part one of the whole thing. Which has been, we've all been through that evolution, in the sense that we all, like, I mean, gosh, I remember my first computer was an Apple II Plus or something like that, so like, everybody's got that starting point, and have gone through the desktops. The very first, I think the very first laptop I ever saw was my freshman year in college, and I think it was like a Xerox something. And it was really just a word processor. And it was, it might as well have been a desktop. It was so big.
It weighed 40 pounds, I bet.
Right. Yeah.
Oh, at least 40 pounds, right? I mean, and it's appreciated of how you just aged yourself there, Elliot.
I'm not ashamed.
But yeah,
and by the way, you missed I had a beard
He
going.
had a beard. He had a whole Santa theme going earlier.
Like a
I'm glad you
flat
weren't on
front,
for that.
you know, like it was big, and you could see all the gray. Like that was the real deal, right,
Yeah.
Bob?
I'd like to hope that Bob
Real
and
deal.
I had some part in that, gray, but
We added a lot on that.
yeah, but it's funny. So I have the same recollection. My first experience with computers was in probably mid elementary school, and they were green screen Apple IIs, and I think we were playing Oregon Trail, and it was great, and it was funny because even back then there were still early intros to things like coding and things like that. So the writing was on the wall, and I am shocked, and I'm sure you guys are as well, to see that progression and kids today and what they're doing. Like, when I think about Minecraft and I think about just the devices they have access to, it's fantastic, although terrifying. I'm pretty sure, that Charlie, my 4-year-old, knows how to use an iPad way better than I do. In fact, she gets frustrated when I don't move fast enough. So these kids now, their access to devices is pretty fantastic.
Yeah,
pretty
and now they're learning virtually, so they have to use this stuff all the time.
Yeah.
And they're going to be masters really, really young. So go ahead.
Yeah, that remote thing you just mentioned, I think that's the easy way to say it is, like, we've all been living just in the short period of time, right? The last, let's call it 4 or 5 years, and that transition, how fast that's been from what I'm going to call unmodern devices to now the prioritization of modern devices. When I say modern, I think thin, light, fast, quick boot ups, the stuff you would expect. Work from home and the remote learning piece has accelerated that so dramatically, because I think people were still sitting on devices, right? They were still sitting back on those bricks, working at home. They just had a secondary device. A lot of those people have realized they don't cut it anymore. And so they've really focused on upgrading them. I mean, the transition in the last 12 months has been pretty significant.
I imagine. Yeah, no. And actually, so you just mentioned, sort of what are the factors of a modern device. And I think a lot of that translates to the cloud, in the sense that, all right, if you really kind of pause from those old bricks that we used to have to what we have today, what do we know? We know, okay, it's way less expensive today than it was back in the day. Back in the day, it was a major investment, to go and get a laptop, right? And so it's less expensive, it's way lighter, and I think I think the conversation there is the cloud is doing a whole bunch of work that the laptop used to have to do.
Mm-hmm.
And compute power, storage, blah blah blah. So today the laptops that we don't need as much within them to get the same sort of output that we used to before.
Yeah.
Is that the right conversation?
I mean, I think it's a fair point, and I think it's all scenario based too, right? I mean, you're always going to need some compute power, at the edge, right? And it's specifically on your role. When I think of somebody like a graphic designer, right, rendering something, locally versus in the cloud, and there's trade-offs. I think the biggest thing that I think of when I think of the cloud and its impact downstream onto devices, and then flipping that into devices impact upstream to the cloud, starting with the first one is, over the last 5 years, and we know this because we've been focused on it so much when we were at Insight together and PCM together, is that people have made and organizations have made significant investments in the cloud. They're consuming it. They have Microsoft 365. They have their backups in Azure. They have compute, some elements in Azure. They're doing all of these things and made all these investments. But if you're not connecting that, if your users aren't able to leverage that, then I kind of argue with, well, what was the point? It's great to have Microsoft 365. I mean, it's amazing. It's got everything you need, the security pieces, which we can certainly talk about because that's been such a prevalent thing in the last, couple of months, or for always, but definitely in the last couple of months. If you're trying to leverage that on a device that doesn't have the horsepower, doesn't have the memory for it, doesn't have the best connections, has old Wi-Fi connections, or you have to hardwire in on a landline. I mean, are you really getting everything out of your other investments? We talk about, and Bob, all the time, right? Cloud optimization. having modern devices is just as important to cloud optimization as anything else, because if you're not actually getting out of your cloud technologies what you need at the end, was it worth the investment? And I think, I don't know for sure, but I'm guessing a lot of businesses are going to start evaluating, right? You go back after a year, and you say, hey, did you get the ROI out of this that you need? And you might get some mixed bags if they don't have the right experience. And the device is, I mean, we're interacting right now on devices. We're leveraging cloud. I mean, we're talking on Teams right now. All of this is happening, online. This is up in the cloud. In fact, we're all on video. But if we all had old, unmodern devices that were sucking down bandwidth, none of this would work, right?
Mm-hmm. Or if we had to go to a office to communicate like this, even with the old hardware, right? Yeah, I think mobility, if the last year has taught us anything, mobility and being able to work remotely, you don't need the infrastructure. You don't need the servers at a location, and you can get the bandwidth at home now, and you're able to work from pretty much any location that has the appropriate amount of bandwidth. So that's great.
Yeah.
So Brian, I've got a little different question, because one of the things for me is the business side, and I'll tell a little story of when I worked at Microsoft. So I was part of the tablet PC launch back in the day, and Microsoft, Elliot's laughing, Microsoft basically did that, but the whole purpose was to business, right? They completely ignored the retail market when that is, and the tablet PC did not do well at all, and was gone in a matter of years. And Apple comes with their basically same thing, and they market it to the general public, and it skyrockets, right? It absolutely skyrockets off. So I think Microsoft had a real big learning thing on exactly where the market was for devices like that, right? And that was obviously a learning curve. And Microsoft has done a lot of things that Apple have done, and then also have changed it. I saw about 6 months ago that Microsoft closed all of their kind of retail stores, right? Mm-hmm. So I'm really interested.
I did not know that.
Yeah.
Microsoft.
That was early on, maybe March, April. I think they made the decision to go ahead and close those permanently.
Yep. I think there were 83 in the U.S. and they all closed them. Yep.
I did not realize that. Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I'm just interested in from the business side, Brian. What is Microsoft, and when we work with their OEMs now, what are they looking to do? How are they looking to sell? What is the next gen kind of laptops or mobile devices that we can look forward to?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question, and some of this is going to be my personal perspective, and I'll also talk a little bit of what we're working on. I can speak to what we're working on with Acer and things like that. I would say, with Surface and that brand coming to market, I think we're on 5 or 6 years, right? I think that was the starting point for the idea of Windows is back. Not just in business, but in consumer. And those two things are very, I think, related. And in the role I've been in, I would say that's become even more clear. And I'll kind of talk about that here too. But, as I see all of the innovation that Microsoft's done first party, while also working very closely in partnership and making sure that our OEMs are well aware of where we want to head, and from an OS perspective and all of that, I think that we are in, one of the most innovative moments for Windows as a whole. The experience of Windows 10. I mean, I think we all agree, right? There's that fun, up and down with Windows since, 93, if you will. So it's, we've all had our Millennium Edition and, Vista experiences, and, finally seeing some hope with Windows 7 and all that, right? So it's been a journey. But Windows 10 has been now, I think we're about 5 years in, and the experience continues to improve. I would say, looking at the retail space, right, and what we're doing with key retailers like Best Buy and Amazon and Walmart, and consumers' interest in Windows devices has gone up. And some of that is due to this pandemic as well, right? When you think about all the elements you need, right? What we're doing now,
Yep.
Kids working from home. I'll give you a little a fun story. My wife is a teacher, and so she's been teaching remote, and then they went back. We're in California, so it's gotten a little hairy here again recently with COVID, and so now she's back working remotely. And it's great for me to watch because her school issued her an Apple, brand new, beautiful Apple computer, and it's a beautiful looking device. It really is, and it works for a lot of the elements that she needs it to work for. But she uses her old Surface Book from about 4 years ago because the elements of that are so much better than the Apple for what she needs it for. It has a better camera. She's able to communicate faster. It's compatible with all the different applications she needs to use. She doesn't have to worry about anything. So she's sitting downstairs right now in her office space using 2 different laptops at the same time, primarily using that PC. And so I think when I think about that, and it has Windows 10s and all the investments and elements that are going into the experience of the devices, that's just continued to accelerate. So as we're going forward now, you saw like the Surface Duo and the Neo and those things, those foldable devices, split screen devices. I mean, those are the investments and the innovations that I think the OEM partners are going to continue to drive. That's what's going to stay super attractive in the consumer space. And that consumer space is really what drives the experience in business, right? So I hate to say it, but we're all getting older. Gen Z is going to come in here. Gen Z and millennials are going to make up like 75% of the workforce in like 4 years. It's, something aggressive like that. I can't imagine somebody from those generations sitting down at their desk to go use, let's just say an Apple device and go to flip the screen like it moves and it's not even a touch screen. So I think those experiences we're going to continue to drive because they've gotten used to them now in their personal lives. It's going to continue over into the business realm as well.
Well, I think it brings up a good point in the sense that I think prior to, the world we're living in right now, we would think in terms of this is a consumer experience and this is a work experience, that we had partitioned those two off. And I think since, the pandemic where everything's conflated, there is no consumer in work. They're the same experience, right?
Yep.
So you can't think in terms of consumer versus a work experience. The question is, what's an effective experience for it's a different vernacular. It
Yes.
is, what is the mobile experience today here? And I think you're bringing up the right feature set too, in terms of the camera and processing the bandwidth and all the things that are today.
I mean, we used to do, a handful of video calls, and now I would say I join 75% of my calls with my camera on, mostly just to have some sort of interaction. In the school scenario, they require it, right? So having that good camera and all that stuff is really important. But it's funny because you said the word mobility and mobile, right? And we used to travel daily, right? We were on planes and back and forth. And so, the idea of using a device that weighed, more than a couple pounds was just like, no, that's just one more thing for me to lug through security. And now mobility to me is even within my home, right? So can I go and take this laptop and go work out on my patio for a half an hour today? Yeah, right? Because it's got all the still same features. It still can connect no problem. The camera sees me in daylight or in this dim office, all of it, right? You're right. Like it's the vernacular's changed a little bit, and in that these are those fundamental components of the experience that everyone's going to require both in their personal life, and then if they're not already requiring it in their business life, I would be surprised.
Yeah. So let's pivot really quick. More of an advanced sort of conversation between devices and cloud. And that I'm thinking about the virtual desktop, right? So, for those that may not be tuned into that entirely, it's, in essence, serving up your entire desktop from the cloud and then projecting it on the device. So your device isn't responsible for, that desktop, nor the applications within it and the processing of it and the files within it. I mean, it's basically just becoming a dummy station and, kind of going full circle in a way. Right.
Yeah.
But from my perspective, that's, there's an absolute use case there that we see pretty often. And I think it's growing, but is that something you're seeing more frequently?
I couldn't say for certain. even still being back at Insight and PCM, there were some unique examples that came to mind. There was a customer, a major train operator here in the U.S., right, who needed people that were constantly moving around the country to be able to just log into any device at any time, right? And in situations like that, I think it's super applicable, right? This idea of folks logging in off multiple devices or having multiple users into a single device or a station or anything like that. I see that playing a big part in that. And I think it varies, and I think there's security implications in terms of how the organization has that set up. If they want to be able to manage it much more closely, leveraging virtual desktop. I think each company is going to have a unique play. The scenario I see is probably that one device being used by multiple users. The first thing that comes to mind for me.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, it's such an interesting thing because I think it does require sophistication too, right? And so when you talk about that, you're probably talking, and I'd love your guys' perspective, but in the enterprise, right?
Yeah.
Where you see that makes it a lot more sense where they're managing major device depots and all that. I think that changes a bit more as you get downstream into the mid-market in the SMB. Outside of those scenarios where, like, I can imagine like a retail organization, right? Somebody that's got a point of sale system, right? Logging into that could be all a virtualized desktop and all that. That would make a lot of sense as well.
Yeah. And you actually just brought up another thought. And I forget the name of the feature, but in essence, I'll just use Surface. Surface gets sent to me, and I'm a new employee, and then I boot it up, and then then Surface is reaching into the cloud, pulling in my profile, loading up my profile from the cloud.
I want to make sure you never forget the name of this service, because I'm a little disheartened that you've forgotten it.
I'm old, man. Old and I forget stuff.
I think when you shaved your beard, you shaved off some memory or something.
Without question, you have to. Right? That's real.
Windows Autopilot. Windows Autopilot. It's interesting. I've been very passionate about the direction that this could all go for years, right? We talked about it at length. We spun up a couple different opportunities and did everything we could, because I think Autopilot, to me, and to Microsoft as a whole, it's the foundation to modern deployment, which ultimately is going to turn into the as a service model, right? Which has been in development for years, right? As people have progressed into that. Autopilot's everything. I mean, the experience, great. I mean, a perfect example. I just had a new laptop shipped to me just a couple weeks ago. I don't know, within 4 or 5 minutes, everything was set up. My apps were down. Everything was running. No issues, no sign on. I had to authenticate off my phone, just as a one-time thing, and it was perfect. And so that experience that technology is driving, I think is just going to grow leaps and bounds, especially now that it's become more mature. And especially now, again, with the situation we're in, I hate to keep coming back to it, but it's highlighted so many requirements now for businesses that they probably were ready for, but weren't ready to pull the trigger on. I mean, I think remote work's here to stay to some degree, and that'll change by organization, but I think remote work is definitely going to be much more common. That's going to require way better management and experiences of devices. That's going to require, IT being able to be creative, and Autopilot enables that, greatly. I mean, instead of having to get on the phone for 30 minutes with IT for a new employee and set everything up, and you're sharing a screen and the connection drops out and all that, that's eliminated. I mean, you're just managing profiles, and I can talk about Autopilot all day, but
but that's it. I mean, that's the point. The point is we live in this very distributed scenario. And back in the day, if you were a new employee, you went to your desk and somebody from IT came over and issued you the laptop, or maybe set it up while you were at your desk. Or if you were remote before, to your point, you had to call in, they had to come in and manage it. And this is, it's funny. It's like the more we talk about, I'll use the term pandemic, but this last year, and yes, it has been very hard, but one of the silver linings is that because of how mature we've been with the cloud, it really has enabled our ability to keep pace, and
that's it right there. I think where we're at now is all those investments in the cloud, all of that money that's been spent by these organizations, it has already been done, right? Those have been set. And so now it's about, like, are those Bob or Elliot?
Bob's getting a box.
Bob's getting the box. Say hello to the FedEx guy. I hope it's wine or something fun. But it's this idea of those investments starting to, like, let's leverage them to their fullest, right? I mean, if you have, Microsoft 365, you have everything you need for Autopilot. I mean, you're done. I mean, you have to have Azure Active Directory. You have to have basically Intune or some other MDM solution. That's it. And then as long as you're buying modern devices, kind of going back to that, then your IT department can use Autopilot. And so it's just about, how do you then do Autopilot in the right way? Obviously, I don't mean to make light of the work that needs to be done to do it right. But yeah, I mean, this idea now of, sitting at the old water cooler for 2 hours while, the IT guys at your desktop at your desk, reinstalling drivers is just like, can you imagine? I guess that's the question.
Well,
can you imagine?
Now you're dating yourself.
Well, yeah, I try.
Maybe a little bit.
I'm just trying to keep up with
you. Yeah. Okay. I was thinking about, you were talking about devices being on the edge. Yeah. And, I'll call it the partner ecosystem, the folks that you spend a lot of time with, working their way there. And it occurs to me that, that's their reset of their business model in a way, where they're reinvesting their business into the devices on the edge. That's where they see the profit opportunity. Where do you see a lot of that, just specific devices that you're seeing pop up? What does that look like?
Are you talking about, like, where do we see these modern devices start to show up, or
like fast forward 6 months, is there something that you see in the queue where it's like, devices that I wouldn't have thought about, that are beginning to, that edge development, I think, is real. What does that look like?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question. That if I wish I had a crystal ball to know all the amazing things that all these different partners are out there doing. I'm super excited about the idea of these different, kind of foldable devices, more mobile secondary devices and things like that. I just think it adds a different experience, specifically as we talk about all this mobility. So I'm excited to see that. I think for me, kind of stepping back a little bit, where I get super interested in, only because I've been so passionate about it for a couple of years, is, it's the idea of, I'm going to say device as a service, but I think it goes so far beyond that. But this idea of leveraging all these technologies, leveraging these investments, all these changes, this idea now of saying, hey, I'm a business, I'm just going to go out and buy, $2,000 devices. I do think that's valuable, and I think that's definitely there, and everyone's got their different approach. But I think now what we'll start to see, as it becomes more and more mature, is subscribing to it, right? Devices and services.
So what do you mean by that, just specifically? What does that look like from a experience?
Yeah, I mean, this is the Brian Batalico, view of this, having spent so much time, building up some ideas, in the channel. But, I see it actually most likely going to be flattened. And what I mean by that is moving beyond this whole concept of SaaS and device as a service, and it's going to be flattening together. I'm just going to call it solutions as a service. And so, what I mean is modern devices and experiences, whether that be partnerships with ISVs, Microsoft technologies, all bundled into this device where people can subscribe into that experience or that solution that fits their business need, right? So I'll give you an example of where I see this potentially going, of course, right? And so much has to take place for this to all come to fruition. But, I think of, let's say, I don't know, a mining company, right? They've got a mine out somewhere, in the middle of the country, and it's hundreds and hundreds of acres, right? And what they need are various devices for various types of workers. They need them to be able to be deployed in the field. And those devices need to have very specific things installed on them and software to track them, right? that's a lot of, capital expenditure to probably set up something like that, right? Or are you going to work with a partner or solution provider or build it yourself to where, these devices, you can pay for them, let's say $100 a month a user, so that you can track the device while it's down in the mine on the user. It's got a safety app integrated into it. That's the experiences that I think are going to come, to market at some point here, right? It's not going to be just, oh, I'm leasing a device, for a set amount every month and it happens to have Office on it. That exists today, and that's going to continue to evolve. And I think what we're going to get to is more and more of these other partners and software vendors and specialists are going to come into that kind of more operational expense type of model and start building very specific experiences for types of customers, or even within users within a specific company.
Yeah.
So,
and we've talked, you and I have talked about this
at length.
At length. And, part of this is about a couple things. One is, the idea of an online marketplace, right? So,
Sure.
we've all lived this in our world where customers can go to an online marketplace and subscribe to, online solutions like 365. And, that's relatively straightforward because it's a cloud-based service. And, that makes sense. I'm subscribing, I'm paying per month per subscription. And then what we also know is then there's this reality that hardware, like a laptop, can, be purchased online as well. We know that too. I can buy a laptop and it can be shipped to me. But what we don't do that way is outside of leasing, make that a subscription-based service. And so, and to your point, if we can create in that marketplace the ability to build an outcome where I'm selecting this device, these subscriptions to be, preloaded onto that device and get it shipped to this location, and I'm only paying on a monthly basis for it. Yeah. There's a level of sort of operational reality there, but then it really becomes a finance conversation, which you and I have kind of gone through in the weeds, in the sense that that's a little different. Software can be, projected as a subscription because of the way it's costed and the way it's, but with the hardware, it's different, right? But I think that as hardware reduces its cost to a certain price point, it becomes much more viable. Like if you look at the, like the Surface Go, I think, as an example, 350, 360 maybe at a certain cost point, you can begin to see how people could start to take risks there, financially and get it out, and amortize it over a period of time.
Well, I think that's such a good point that you make, because the finance element of this is honestly, it's all of it, right? And I wanted to go back to that marketplace idea here in a second too, but I think you're right. I think the risks are also outweighed with the value of the device extended for a longer period of time. And so, although devices are changing, what is it? It's Moore's law, right? It's every certain period of time, it's getting better and better and faster and processing wise and all that. And devices are modernizing. And would you ever buy a device that existed 5 years ago? Probably not. But 2 years, right? There's a secondary market there, and I think that devices are retaining some value, especially if they're well built, high quality, more expensive devices on the outset. Financing them within these bundle concepts for a period of time, and then having a secondary market for those devices, whether that be, that could be in different markets, there's a lot of market for that. And I think, the marketplace idea too, and we obviously, have been exploring that, when I was at Insight and PCM, but I think also to challenge, to take it even a step further, it's going to be, I think, an opportunity for the industry to say, instead of me just choosing, right? Because I may not know what to choose. I don't know yet, and I'm being a little, very forward leaning here. It's this idea of, development, to say, we've built this for these types of workers in your environment. So Autopilot, right? You can set that up with multiple profiles. Imagine being able to say to that customer, because you know them so well, you've done so much research, as you've said, I've pre-created these bundles that make sense for your 3 or 4 different employee profiles. Right? You've got your executive profile, you've got the guy that's in the field profile, and there's a different device and experience for each of them with different ISV apps all subscribed in. And you've already done it for them, right? And whether that be just from your customer knowledge or, I'm not technical.
Well, no, I mean, I distinctly remember a conversation around the SMB, right? So, like, I mean, there's the different profiles within the company, but then there's SMB, right? So if you gather enough intelligence in terms of, the multitudes of SMB organizations that come to a portal and subscribe to specific things, you can start to begin to build patterns and best profiles, right? And that becomes an offering value.
Yeah. My favorite example that I always use, and I don't know why, and it probably speaks to the fact that I probably spend too much time there, is dentist offices, right? Now, but it's,
Sorry, for me, it's Starbucks. So that's okay.
There you go.
Yeah.
So dentist offices, right? Very small business, right? They own their own practice. They've got 5 or 6 office workers, but they've got a lot of different connected machines and other things, right, that require various types of security. Or, so you can imagine where you go in with, a predetermined, to your point, a best practice medical office, offering that includes, the latest ISV software to manage their patients and scheduling. And that's $5 a month within that bundle. The endpoint device, the tablet, so that they can log, check people in outside because they're not allowed to come in the dentist office without a mask on. All these different experiences that I think, as providers and solution providers, we can start thinking more, I guess, narrow on these types of customers to really dive into what do they need, and they may just not know it yet. I mean, I went to a dentist office because, again, I go there all the time. Why, I don't know. And it was an endodontist, and I had to fill in some information, and I swear it was on a Windows XP machine that was 3 inches thick, that was connected to the internet, and I put in my social security number. And I had a tremendous amount of stress in doing so, and immediately then told the front desk, person to say, that machine hasn't been supported in like a decade, and that if anybody wants to hack in and get all of your medical records, this is the point right here. And so, those are just, that's where, the experience could say, I've got a bundled device that's secure for your, patient interaction front office. That, I think that's where it could go. When I say solution as a service, that's what I mean. It's predetermining and defining it based on your experience of selling to hundreds and thousands of other customers just like them.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, those are really boring examples you gave. But
dentist offices,
and mining company and dentist office are the 2 examples. I'm thrilled. I'm at the edge of my seat, man.
Well, I tap into my other background, which is, when I tried to go through and become a firefighter, I've got lots of ideas of what technology can provide.
Your background's in adventure sports, and you went right to dentist office and mining companies. Yeah, that's awesome, man. So let's talk about the fun stuff. What is your partners, developing outside of laptops, right? I don't think any of us thought that our doorbell would be connected and have a camera in it, right? What is some of the new stuff that is in development, or that your partners are thinking about, throwing a Microsoft OS into and seeing, you've obviously are working with 2 big companies that are both in the enterprise space and the retail space or consumer space. So what are they working on?
Great question. And I get the sense of a little digging that I probably won't be able to go into too much. But I kind of alluded to it before. I think it's maximizing the experiences on Windows. One thing that was interesting, and I don't think it's actually here in the US, but Acer actually had created, this is really out there, but some digital rosary beads, and like a click to pray, and it consumed Azure, and it's funny things like that where there's elements embedded in it, and different things that are required on the back end of like Windows and how it connects up. And I certainly don't know, and so far what I've seen has actually probably been more focused on just continuing to maximize the devices that are in the market today. I mean, there's definitely, going to be some really interesting stuff around Windows coming up, I would say, in the next, 12, 18 months, that I think will start to, see different devices and types of devices. I mean, you're already seeing it with that Surface device that came out, right? I mean, I think Surface is a great place to look to where the Windows, momentum is starting to go. When I think of like Panasonic, it's that tough book line, right? Just those a lot of connected devices and unique experiences. I think they were installing some on some submarines lately down in the Caribbean. I mean, all of these different things. And I think what it is that they're finally realizing that the power of Windows and the connectivity of Windows and all the other stuff is allowing them to go into different places, right? So it's taking the devices that they've made so many good changes and investments on and finding the best places for them to start to land. So submarines apparently is one of those places.
Big market. So in terms of 5G, we had a really fascinating conversation here around 5G and just the implications of it. Are you seeing that as part of the conversation in terms of, hey, we have to build this sort of feature set here to support that kind of future?
Yeah, I mean, I don't, not being a technical person and at all, right? So if I think about it from a marketing and a business and a strategy perspective, right, which is more in my realm, I mean, I think it just is the continuation of the same conversation, right? It's you are eliminating roadblocks, continuously eliminating roadblocks along the way, right? So if the roadblock before was you were tied to the desk, right, because we only had desktops, that roadblock was eliminated with the laptop, right? As the laptop became thinner and lighter, it eliminated the need to leave it at home when you traveled, right? 5G, right, is just now going to be eliminating any sort of latency problems, any sort of bandwidth issues for anything that we're doing. I mean, the most unique thing I saw a demo on was the ability to do remote surgery, because the connectivity was so instantaneous that you're talking about such a finite skill, right? Being able to be done, from the opposite side of the world. I think that's what it opens up. Now, how that relates into, devices and all these things, I think what we'll find, at least again, from my personal perspective, is those last bits of technology like that required that hardwire in, like I think of like an ATM machine or something like that, right? Something that's probably wired into the background. It's an old device. It's not very secure. I think something like 5G allows maybe a different experience on something like, maybe ATM is not a great example, but this idea of a device that couldn't exist before, couldn't exist in the experience because the connectivity was so required. It had to be literally plugged into the router to work before. That's going to be gone. And, I honestly don't know exactly everything that's going to open up from that. Bob, I'll give you something, more exciting here.
Please.
ATMs and dentist offices. I'm shocked. All right. So I didn't talk about this in my background, but at one point I went through a fire academy and I was trying to be a firefighter. And then, the recession was going on, and that's a whole other thing. But, I think about the technology that can impact public safety, right? And, I imagine a scenario with, rigs or cars showing up on site, being able to have schematics of buildings in real time, sensors and tracking on police officers. I mean, a body cam for a police officer, which are just so necessary in the environment that we're in now. Now imagine geolocation and location tracking and very small, within a building exactly where they are, and 5G enables that without any latency. So not only does it keep the safety for like the firefighters and the police officers and things like that who are going into a scenario, but if you've preloaded and use something like, I think it's called the Azure Twin for, like architecture and things like that, load that into an application, have real-time tracking of where they are because it's all 5G enabled and it's so fast. The captain or the commanding officer is sitting in the rig. He knows exactly where his teams are deployed. They have heat sensing. They can see where the fire is. They know where, think about that kind of experience where before it would you can't do that, right? You can't have a firefighter about to turn a corner to hit a fire and be told that it's not actually there because there was that 20-second lag. I mean, so those are the scenarios that building devices and experiences, again, that take advantage of stuff like that could be interesting, right? And I couldn't say 5G for sure enables it because I just don't know enough. But I think that's where that idea of removing gaps and roadblocks, those are industries that it could have a big impact on.
Yeah. Really good one. I can see that too.
Was that a
makes sense.
better, more exciting?
Yeah, it is more exciting. Yes,
Yeah,
thank
yeah.
you. That
Went
was
from the-
nice. Nice example.
Dentist chair to a burning building. I mean, that's good.
Right. I thought you might mention Gravedigger or something next. I had no idea.
Well, here you go, though. Like,
I got an idea for that.
Yeah, I got
an
it.
idea. Well, but think about the experience with sports, right? I mean, I know there are some new stadiums now where I know PCM had done some work to install, such intense networking capabilities, but the experience with sports and all these different things where, especially now, I mean, I know Elliot, you've probably joined some Laker games, I think, with your Oculus on and things like that. But when you're in stadiums or you're sitting outside the stadiums, like, what's the experience like? You don't want a gap in any of that, like, he's going up for a three and then it spots out for a second, or you're 20 seconds behind. I remember clearly sitting in the parking lot of Angel Stadium in 2002 when they won the World Series, and the crowd cheered. And then 20 seconds later, I saw it on the giant TV that we had put in the back of the truck, sitting in the parking lot tailgating. So, how do you smash that together? And does 5G enable that kind of stuff? So there's another
For
exciting
sure
thing
it does.
sports.
And you're missing a big market there for sports is in-game betting, right? Because that is going to be huge from a connected standpoint for fans in the stadium and being able to place a bet right there. Right. I mean, it makes no sense, even when you're in Vegas, that you have to go to the window to place a bet. I mean, that's just ridiculous. Yeah. You're going to be able to do it anywhere. Yeah.
Now, to take that full circle back to the first part of our conversation, right? Like, it's great that the technology exists, but not if it's not integrated and built into the devices and the infrastructure that you've made your investments in.
That's
right. So,
right.
It's this idea of when you ask about what's coming, what's new, there will be some form factor things that we've already seen, but it's stuff like that, right? It's to say, it's just going to become at some point a requirement, right, for those devices to have that impact. And so that's the stuff that we'll probably start to see.
Yeah,
perfect stuff. Well, I think we got to wrap it up. I think we're at our hour. So I'm going to leave you, Brian, with $1 billion idea that you can take to your leadership team. Okay, you ready? An Xbox gaming PC. It needs to happen. I don't know why there isn't one already. And that's easily $1 billion. I know it would take away for some of the devices or some of the consoles. I get it. But, come on. It's too easy. That's low-hanging fruit right there.
Well, here, I've got an answer for you.
All right.
Okay? It's not an Xbox PC. But, I mean, I know Acer as one of my partners has amazing gaming devices. We're talking the highest end specs. The things are just awesome. They look cool. But everything comes with Game Pass now, right? A subscription. You can
There you go. Yep,
you can
that's
subscribe
right.
and play Xbox games on any PC with Xbox Game Pass. So it's not quite your Xbox PC that you wanted, but it does bring the Xbox experience right into your Windows 10 PC. So I think that's the best I could do for you. So
that's all right. When it comes out, I'm just going to ask for 10%. That's it.
I was going to say, I think I just solved your problem, and I'll take my 10%.
It's pretty good. It's not bad. It's a step in the right direction. For sure.
Awesome.
Thank you, Brian.
Yes, thank you, Brian. Really appreciate it, man.
Yeah, thanks, guys.
All right, we'll